Alright guys, so in this video I am going to be discussing American Airlines Flight 11 and Mohamed Atta, the lead hijacker, unknowingly sending air traffic control a message that was meant for the citizens in the cabin, and just everything that led up to that moment. And what did Atta say, and really why did he say it? What do I think? Let's get into it. So when it comes to American Airlines Flight 11, Atta was obviously the leader of this operation. He was actually in Portland, Maine. I did a previous video talking about Atta and a muscle hijacker traveling via a rental car to Portland, staying the night in Portland, going to Pizza Hut and other places, and then taking off from Portland to Boston, and then Boston on a cross-country flight, the destination being LA. So Atta arrived in Boston from Portland on time at 6:45 a.m. That's another crazy thing about September 11th, is just the weather cooperation. You get delays and cancellations everywhere, and Atta, along with another hijacker, making another flight. Imagine if there was a big storm system up in Maine and it was perfectly clear at Boston Logan. Atta wouldn't even be there for it. So it's interesting how all of this played out, but the flight was on time, and at 6:45 a.m. Atta touched down in Boston. At 6:52 a.m., approximately 7 minutes later, another hijacker who trained with Atta in Florida at a flight school called at the Boston Logan International Airport from a payphone. He was calling Mohamed Atta's cell phone, and the call was to confirm that the attacks were happening. And by approximately 7:40, all 5 of the hijackers on Flight 11 had boarded the plane. The flight was scheduled to leave at 7:45. Now, there were 2 hijackers that sat in first class on this flight. Neither of them were Atta. Another strange situation happened right before takeoff, when an American Airlines flight service manager named Michael Woodward walked onto the plane for a final check before leaving. He noted that Mohamed Atta had a very broad, blank expression, and obviously that's pretty crazy if you are Michael Woodward, considering you checked that plane and just 30-40 minutes later it's being flown into the side of a building. The aircraft, however, was running slightly behind schedule. It was cleared to taxi to the runway at 7:50 a.m. and the aircraft began takeoff at 7:59. Now, people speculate that the hijacking happened around 8:14 a.m., which would have been 15 minutes after takeoff. It's quite early, and the reason they did it that early was because you let the real pilots get the plane up so you don't have to worry about climbing. But remember, this plane was headed for LA, the exact opposite direction of New York City, so they wanted to get up there early so they could turn the plane and crash it relatively early. Mohamed Atta made 2 mistake transmissions to Boston Air Traffic Control, the first one coming at 8:24. This would have been 9 minutes after the hijacking, and probably about 7 or 8 minutes after Atta entered the cockpit. Now, if you actually listen to the first recording of Atta, nobody mentions this, but right at the beginning, it seems like Atta was saying a word, possibly the word nobody, and it cut it off to just buddy. And that happened at the beginning, but nobody mentions that. It's kind of strange, but Atta possibly was saying the word nobody, and then when he subsequently pressed the wrong button, because he was trying to broadcast this to the cabin, not to the air traffic control. By the way, the cabin heard none of this. This is directly to air traffic control. He might have been saying the word nobody, and when he pressed the button, it just picked up buddy. And then the air traffic control dude says, "What?" in kind of a weird tone. Although I will note those could have just been background voices, and that tends to happen a lot with transcripts, especially when you're listening to them. You'll think someone says something, but it's actually a background voice, someone else in the same room as the air traffic control person communicating to someone. It could have also been that. And then Atta says, quote, "We have some planes, just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're returning to the airport." He kind of said it like that. It was pretty quickly. And then seconds after that first message, there was a delay of a few seconds. He says, "Nobody move, everything will be okay. If you try and make any moves, you'll endanger yourself and the airplane. Just stay quiet." And the reason I think he said, "We have some planes," was because Atta wanted the passengers to understand that this was like an operation. Okay, this was happening. This is what we're doing. We're professionals. We have multiple planes. Now, obviously, even if this did register the people in the cabin, they probably wouldn't really react to that first statement, we have some planes. And the air traffic control didn't either. They actually had to go back through the recording after the plane crashed into the tower and hear Atta say, we have some planes. So I think he said we have some planes to try and, use it as an intimidation factor, like, we know what we're doing, you need to sit back, sit down. Obviously, at that point in 2001, the expectation was they wouldn't crash the plane, they would land it somewhere, try and get money, so you have a major advantage in terms of many of the passengers. They're not going to revolt because they think that this is a possible hostage situation. There's going to be some type of demands, and the hijackers would not want to die, but obviously that was not the case at all. And then Atta made his second broadcast to air traffic control. This was about 10 minutes later at 8:34, says, quote, "Nobody move, please. We are going back to the airport. Don't try to make any stupid moves." And so obviously trying to falsely calm the passengers by saying we're returning to the airport. Obviously, again, they did not hear any of this. Atta hit the wrong button when he was broadcasting this, but those were the two main quotes. And obviously, had the passengers in the cabin known what was about to come, I'm sure they would have certainly revolted. But it is also important to note the way American Airlines Flight 11 did it in terms of their hijacking. They moved very quickly in comparison to some of the other planes. Also, again, it was the first plane to crash, so obviously none of the passengers are really going to know, but just 15 minutes after takeoff, they basically redirect the plane. They don't even have to turn it based on where Boston is located in comparison to New York City. Now, there were two flight attendants that were able to contact American Airlines, Amy Sweeney and Betty Ung. And when it comes to Betty Ung, they have removed a lot of Twin Towers 9/11 type videos off of the internet. I do specifically remember a video that had Betty Ung say we're flying really, really low, and maybe say something about seeing other skyscrapers and things like that, and then the video cuts out. Now, I haven't seen it in a while, but I do remember seeing something like that, and they were very proactive in terms of letting American Airlines know what happened, but it is basically an impossible situation based on the information that they had outside of the only way you could potentially save it is if you had the brawn to break in and before Atta plunged the plane and nosedived it, be able to get in there and get someone that could fly it. And honestly, in a situation like that, you would just be killing the hijackers with whatever you had, something sharp preferably, and then you could potentially take over the plane. But again, the issue is obviously they had no information, but that situation, the American Airlines Flight 11, it's so bad because it happened so quickly and you're following protocols, and it quite literally is completely helpless. Now, there's a lot of speculation on what would have happened. Let's say Mohamed Atta misses the Twin Towers completely. Maybe he was too high. Maybe he was coming in at a wrong angle and he goes directly past them. There were fighter jets that were up there. The issue is you're flying over a very densely populated area, New York City, and I'm not sure what would happen. I would imagine, honestly, Atta would try and turn the plane around 180 and then retry to fly it into the North Tower. That's just what I think would have happened. And can you really shoot down a plane over New York City? It's just not really an option. Now, maybe if Atta had veered off when he missed the building and possibly was over the water, you would preferably shoot it down because you could save a lot of lives. But even in a situation like that, you just don't know what the demands are of the hijackers, which makes it so hard considering where they're at in New York City. And obviously, it's just a hypothetical that didn't happen. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.